Welcome to Pivot and Passion. I'm your host, Stephanie Cully, and I'm here to help you follow your true purpose. My goal is to help you build unshakable confidence and showcase your strengths. Each episode is filled with inspiration and tips to help you in your career and personal life. So grab your morning cup of coffee or your evening tea and let's dive in. Today, we are talking about how to crush your interviews the way that Taylor Swift crushes ticket sales. One of the reasons that I thought this would be a great topic is because I saw so much overlap between what Taylor Swift does in crushing her ticket sales to what a lot of my clients do when they're crushing their interviews. There are some similarities that we can take, such as storytelling and some other areas that I'll get into that are really going to help you in today's episode. Another reason I thought this was relevant was why not look at someone who's had tremendous success? Taylor Swift has successfully landed 14 Grammys. She's also won Album of the Year award 4 times, and she's the only person to have done that. And she's also grossed $1.04 billion in ticket sales. She's the first tour to ever hit that milestone. Another thing I noticed about her is that she stood out to her fans. And while some people may see this as a negative thing, I just see it as something that's very interesting, is that her fans will fight for her to the death. So for example, I was listening to Trevor Noah's podcast the other day, and he talks about how some different people critique musicians. And there was one point where they were considering whether or not they wanted to do some critiques on Taylor Swift. But they knew if they were going to do some critiques that they would probably experience some backlash from fans and that they had to be prepared that their website might go down. So it was a factor that they took into consideration in whether or not they wanted to proceed with that segment. I'm not going to go into the details of whether that's right or wrong, but it just goes to show how unique she is and that her fans are ecstatic over her. So let's go ahead and dive into the first tip. The first tip is that Taylor Swift is extremely prepared. For those of you who aren't familiar with her recent tour, she went on the Eras tour and she performed a 44-song set, which is incredibly long, takes incredible amount of energy, and I believe her music was about 4 hours long. Imagine singing, dancing, running through the rain in some cases, trying to perform 44 different songs. That's incredible. And many athletes have even compared themselves to her, saying how much effort it takes, how much athleticism it takes in order to be able to go through a 44-song set. The only way that she's been able to do this is by extreme preparation. I did a little bit of research on the preparation that she did, and she actually spent 6 months before she even went on stage preparing. The way that she did this was she went on the treadmill and she ran every single day. And every single day, she sang those 44 songs. Can you imagine the amount of energy that takes? In addition to that, so that's not the only thing she did. She also, I'm sure, was working with special trainers and everything. And they had a special strength, conditioning, and weights program for her at the gym. So tremendous amount of effort, tremendous amount of preparation. And the reason that I covered this tip first is because I don't want you to think that you just show up and things are going to work out for you in the interview. One of the biggest things that you can do, and one of the things that has helped my clients tremendously, is by being prepared. So my question for you is, how are you showing up to interviews? Are you showing up just knowing the bare minimum and expecting questions like, can you tell me about yourself? Explain your resume to me, and some of the basics of the job? Or are you putting in that extreme effort that's required in order to land the job? Are you asking yourself questions about the company? Are you doing your research? Are you understanding more about their products? Are you understanding their mission, their vision, all the other things that go into it? Because by doing those extra steps, you're preparing yourself even more and you're making it so you're ready for when game time happens. Some other things that I would recommend related to preparing for the interview is it's not just about looking at these questions and writing down the answers. You have to be really thorough when you're going through and you're preparing. And for some clients, what that looks like is they'll record themselves. And then not just record yourself, go back and watch yourself. Look for what your body language is telling you. That was one of the major surprises from one of my clients was they were making a certain face while they were answering the questions. So they were able to tailor that after going through recording themselves and watching their body language. What about how many ums or ahs you have? Really looking for those filler words can help you in your job preparation because the more filler words you have, the more unprepared you look or the less confident you look. Additionally, it's great practice to practice with someone else. Maybe you have a study partner, or maybe you have a career coach that you're working with. If you have someone that can help put the pressure on, that's going to help you prepare even more for the interview. So, to wrap this one up, preparation is what's going to help you in order to land the job. And I have a quick story about this one. So I thought that I was thoroughly prepared for an interview that I went into. And this was back in my days when I was going into Scrum Master roles, or for those of you who aren't familiar with it, similar to a project manager role. And I had all of my behavioral based questions down. But the problem was, I was so focused on that, I wasn't looking at some of the theory questions. And I can't tell you, I was incredibly embarrassed and also just felt extremely unprepared when some of the basic questions came up and I froze. Some basic questions like, what are the three pillars of Scrum? These are things that can be found easily in the guide online, but because I was so focused on other areas, I wasn't focused on these types of questions that came up. And for you, you may not be interviewing for a Scrum Master role, you may be interviewing for something else, but what are some of the basic theory questions that could come up? And I would say vice versa. I think a lot of people spend so much time on theory, but they don't necessarily put the time and effort in for the behavioral based questions to figure out what are the different stories that I have associated with this. So definitely take that into account when you're studying for your interviews. Tip number 2, storytelling. If you want to nail the interview, then you have to nail your storytelling skills. And Taylor Swift is incredible at this. I want to bring up an example of one of her songs, which is Back to December. And in this song, she's so descriptive and she walks you through what's going on. She starts by talking about and actually talking through what she's saying to her love or her former lover as she's walking through the song. She goes back and she talks about how things were back in December, just like in the song, when they saw each other. You can feel her hurt. You can feel her pain. You can also feel how she misses him. By painting that vivid picture, it makes it easier to envision yourself in that situation. And if we're talking about during an interview, this makes it easier for them to envision what you were doing in the situation and how you will handle things when you're actually in real life and this scenario comes up again. So, a couple of questions for you. How do you show up when you're in interviews? Do you talk about what you would do? Would you talk about how you would handle it? Maybe you talk a little bit about what's happened in the past. Do you actually go into detail? And are you using one of the main tips, which is using the SAR or the SAR method? Are you talking about the situation that happened? So, going a bit into detail, giving them a backstory about why you were there. So, if we're talking about conflict management, what was that actual conflict that you were dealing with? Do you talk about the action? So, what are the specific actions that you took in order to move past this and to move your team forward? And most importantly, which a lot of people forget, is the result. Do you talk about how what you did resulted in improvement to the team, improvement in the organization, saving them money or saving them time, whatever the case may be? If you're not including storytelling in your interview skills, then you're missing a huge blind spot. And I have a story of a better situation when I went into an interview. So after going through realizing that I didn't know enough about theory, I made sure to cover that. But I also made sure to have even more stories that I wanted to tell. So in this specific example, it's behavioral based, and that's where you'll use a lot of your interview storytelling skills is in the behavioral based questions. And it was amazing to see the interviewers' faces light up when you could tell that I struck a chord as I was going through the answers. So their question was about how do you handle high pressure situations? When it's related to clients, things that are not going properly. And for me, rather than saying, well, if I was in a high pressure situation, I would go and have a conversation. I would do this, ABC. No, rather than doing that, I gave them a specific story and I went through the situation of how when I was working for a client, We had an issue in production where it was actually affecting our customers. And I walked them through the details of what needed to happen. And I talked about what that pressure was on me, but also with my team and how I was able to help them manage under pressure. I also went through the actions of the exact steps that I needed to do, the things that I needed to talk to, and how I had to keep the leadership team calm and understand what the root cause was of this. And I also went into the results. So I talked about one of the most important things, which is how did you actually solve the problem? What ended up happening in the end? And of course, you want to see some type of a happy ending, some type of lesson that was learned, and how things were corrected going forward. So by doing that and by telling a story, that was way more powerful than if I had just gone through and told them, well, in theory, this is what I would do. Or in the past, here's a little bit of a situation of what happened, but not actually going into the details of it. So keep that in mind when you're talking about the things that happen in a behavioral based interview question. And the final tip that I have for you is to surprise and delight your audience. Taylor Swift is known for doing this. And I was looking through some news articles to find some past ones. One of the ones off the top of my head that I remember was back in the day, this may have been 10 years ago, she just randomly showed up to a couple's wedding. I'm sure they were talking about how they were huge Taylor Swift fans, but she showed up, surprised them, and she actually played a song for them or sang a song for them that they loved. She's also been known to go to bridal showers and show up with a gift. I know she's done similar things where she showed up at, like, say, Make-A-Wish or somewhere for helping a child that's in need or a child that's going through some health issues. And I thought maybe even as time had passed on that she didn't do this as often, but I found a recent article that said that I believe she went on tour, say, 5 years ago, and one of her fans had a major medical issue or went through a car crash, I believe it was, and they were unable to make it. And what she ended up doing was she promised them that they would have tickets when the next tour happened. Sure enough, she had her Eras tour. Well, it's been going on over the last year, and she had tickets just for that fan. So she really makes sure to make people feel loved, cared about, and appreciated. So if you're able to do this in your interview, then this will help you a lot. Another way that you can do this is you can make them feel connected by doing your practice of finding out more about the person that you're interviewing, finding out more about the organization. We talked about understanding the products and mission, but you can also go in and you can look at news articles to find out what are some of the things that you're struggling with. Imagine what would happen if you showed up and you were talking in that interview and you said, I noticed that you guys are really struggling to get more clients. I actually came up with this idea that's related to a social media campaign that I would love to talk to you about. Just imagine how much more impactful that is than showing up and just going through the traditional route of an interview. So let's go ahead and recap what we talked about in today's episode. We talked about the importance of being prepared. It's not enough to just show up for an interview and know the basics about the company. You have to understand more about their products, their vision. You also have to do a lot of that practice related to the behavioral based questions that will come up and also understanding theory or other related questions that will come up in your interview. Secondly, we talked about the importance of storytelling. Storytelling is going to put your audience in the actual hot seat and help them to understand more clearly what you've done in the past, which will be an indicator of what you'll do in the future. And lastly, you're going to blow them away by delighting and surprising them. That means doing your extra homework, whether that's understanding more about the company, understanding some of the issues that they're going through, looking up the person that's actually interviewing you and being able to have a conversation related to their career path or what they've learned in that organization. I hope you found today's episode helpful. If you have found it helpful, make sure to stay tuned for future episodes. All you have to do is hit the subscribe button and you'll get alerts when the next episode is live. Thanks so much for joining today, and I'll see you in the next episode.